Once you begin awakening and clearing what no longer serves you, your true gifts start coming online. If you've been sensing intuition, synchronicity, or a rising call towards something more, that is not a coincidence. It is your soul remembering itself. This is the third and final video in a 3-part series on spiritual awakening, where we will be discussing opening up to your soul's gifts, a deeper connection to spirit and the divine, and aligning with your true purpose. I would highly recommend watching the first 2 in order if you haven't already. They are linked in the description. The first video went over the general spiritual awakening process, followed by the deep and inevitable process of clearing and healing in the second video. So now let's jump into what starts happening as you really start expanding into this spiritual awakening process. So, what generally tends to happen after an awakening begins? After the chaos, which can happen, after some type of initial stirring, and after the clearing, after one begins making space, something else begins. Awakening isn't just about the purging. It's about remembering who you actually are. This is the next step in this process. Awakening shows you what's not real. Clearing creates space. And this phase, what we're going to be talking about in this video, is where your real life begins. So I would like to reassure you, if you find yourself in some of these earlier phases where you're doing a lot of clearing, a lot of purging, or there could be some instability, this process is not endless difficulty. It is just the pathway and the doorway into embodiment, meaning, and your connection to spirit. Things do get better and exciting. Now, let's dive deeper into what actually happens during this phase of expansion. As a natural byproduct of making space from a lot of the clearing and healing that we discussed in the prior video, the next natural pathway is for sensitivities to begin to appear. And I would like to iterate that these things can happen simultaneously. This process, this awakening process, is non-linear. It is completely normal and appropriate to be perhaps simultaneously awakening, opening your horizons, clearing, still needing to make space, and expanding into new sensitivities and the things we'll be discussing in this video. So it is totally okay if things are happening simultaneously, or you may be bouncing back in between phases. That is totally normal. But what tends to happen is that this becomes a self-reinforcing loop. The more your horizons get expanded, the more you heal and clear, the more you expand and open up to more sensitivities. So, what sort of these natural sensitivities start waking up as you move along this process? I would like to iterate that these types of sensitivities shouldn't be considered new. This is who you've always been. It's just finally coming online more fully. This is especially noticeable amongst children. Children come into the world with far less rules, programming, patterns of orienting themselves in the world. They naturally come in more free and open. So it is very common for children, especially very young children, to have these sensitivities already online, and they feel natural to people, to such young children. But what tends to happen is they are either rooted out of them by the environment, or there just was not an environment to where they were allowed to bloom and blossom and to really grow to their fullest. So I just wanted to iterate to you that nothing that I'm sharing here would be considered out of the ordinary. Many of you perhaps have already had these types of sensitivities in your life at various phases, and you might not have had the understanding to know what was really happening, or they may have gone dormant for a period of time. and perhaps now it is a more appropriate time for them to start coming back online. Now, I'll share a few common early signs of sensitivities coming online. A very common one that could have even been present for much of your life is what we would call being empathic. This is picking up on others' emotions. This one is quite common in people who are generally moving through what we would call a spiritual awakening process well before they would even have the words to understand what they were experiencing. This is the type of sensitivity that could be so normal that someone might not even think that that other people don't even experience this. But this actually is a bit more of a rarer sensitivity to have amongst the collective. But this is a very common one, to just naturally be able to pick up on what other people are feeling, what is moving through other people's energy fields, especially people who you are in close proximity with, if you're in the same home, in the same room, or in an active conversation. It is very common to become sensitive to the energies from someone else, deeper than just the words that they may be emitting, deeper than just like their body language. You can feel the energy. Another thing is not only picking up on other people's emotions and energies, but also picking up on the energies of environments and physical locations, places. Very common phrase you might find yourself using is, "This place has bad vibes." That is a real thing, a sensitivity that you can pick up on, where you just have this feeling that there is a certain type of energy in this space, and you might be drawn to specifically go to specific places because of the energy. Even if you don't yet have the words for it, you know how you feel because of the environment. That is the subconscious sensitivity starting to come online. You sense the energy here it is a high vibe place, a high vibe environment, or the people here are high vibe. That is a very common sensitivity that begins to come online. Another thing that typically comes online as well is knowing that something or someone is off before your mind can even explain it. This is your intuition coming online, and your intuition naturally improves as you move about this process, as you make space. Your intuition becomes very strong, and it may take some time for your mind to start trusting that intuition, but your intuition becomes stronger for all things, not just about your physical environment, about certain people, but with all things. Your intuition begins to improve. You may also start becoming more aware of collective energies, collective spikes in the collective energetic field, especially in more of like your immediate town or location, region that you're in. Different shifts in the energy field, especially maybe if a common one that I've noticed for myself is when there are major weather events that are coming. It is possible to start picking up on perhaps the anxiety or the fear, that bracing pattern that comes in advance of a known storm that could be coming. You might start picking up on that type of stuff before it even happens. And that is essentially being attuned to the collective field. Another thing that is common is sudden increases in dream clarity. Basically, getting more robust information through the dream field. You start recognizing that these aren't just random subconscious processes that are coming through in visual form. There are messages here, and you should pay attention. So you start naturally opening up in that area. And I would like to iterate that these are not burdens, but these are your native abilities resurfacing. And it can be wobbling, and even possibly, it can be wobbly and possibly overwhelming at first, but that is totally normal. It just requires practice and stabilization. Eventually, these things become welcomed and second nature. Eventually, you get to the point where you're thankful that you have this level of sensitivity once you know how to manage them and not allow them to take you over. You become incredibly grateful that you have this level of knowing and intuition, this level of sensory perception that perhaps others may not. So being empathic or sensitive is not a personality trait. It is your soul remembering itself. This is your natural way of being. So I hope this helps normalize any experiences that you might be having and hopefully removes any fear that might be present around these things. A good way to explain this could be comparing it to some of the superhero movies perhaps you may have seen. In a lot of the origin stories of some of these superheroes, characters like Spider-Man, Superman, their abilities involve picking up on these subtle perceptions, and in their origins of how they first come into a lot of these abilities, they get overwhelmed by them. They're just completely flooded by all of this external sensory perceptions. But what happens in every single one of these superhero movies? These heroes stabilize their abilities, and you will too. So, moving beyond now just general sensitivities, what else begins to expand? What happens is that clearing leads to an opening in a very specific place in your being. Once the old wounds and pains are gone, the heart begins to open. And the heart is the bridge to everything above it. Here I will give a brief overview of the chakra points, or your primary energy centers. The sensitivities are mostly in our higher centers. So just as a brief overview, we have 7 primary chakra points: our root center, our sacral, our solar plexus, our heart, our throat, our third eye, and our crown. We need to clear and stabilize the lower centers before the energy can rise up into the higher ones, where these extrasensory perceptions are housed or are emanated from. So for example, our root energy center needs to move from just purely survival into stability. Our sacral center needs to move from hedonic pleasure to creative life force and joy. Our solar plexus needs to move from striving to inner power. And the heart must move from being closed and guarded to open and flowing. So, as the heart opens, people naturally start feeling more connected to everything, to themselves, to others, to everything else, to nature, circle of life. And as a natural byproduct of this, once you start feeling more connected, you start feeling more open, you're receptive, you're essentially signaling that you're open and receptive. That's when you start sensing even more. Again, your intuition becomes stronger. Ironically, your intuition, hence why it's called your gut feeling, is more in one of your lower centers, in that solar plexus area. So even your lower centers have some of these sensory perceptions. And as you naturally start opening your heart and expanding, even your lower energy centers start contributing, such as within your intuition. Your gut feelings get much stronger. But especially once you start opening up your heart, start easing and softening, the energy can now rise into these higher centers, throat, into your third eye, and into your crown. These are where your extrasensory, or perhaps what we might call psychic abilities, emanate from. So this is the feeling of essentially going through a process of guiding this energy from your lower centers into the higher centers, and what happens naturally as a result of this process. So what happens beyond just these basic sensitivities, which we have been discussing so far? There are deeper layers of sensitivities and what we might call extrasensory perceptions. And here is where things get fun, especially as your third eye opens. Your third eye is typically associated with what we might call the clairs, which I will lay out briefly here, or what we might call the psychic abilities. They typically emanate from your third eye center, which is correlated with your pineal gland in your brain. These are available to everyone. I wish to impart that to you. This is not reserved for a special select few people, or people who are supremely practiced and trained. These, again, as the energy starts to rise in you, it is an inevitability that these abilities will come online. So now to go through what these types of abilities are involved, especially as you start opening up your third eye. These are often referred to as the clairs because they all start with the phrase or the prefix clair, such as claircognizance. This is basically extrasensory knowing. Basically, you just start knowing things without needing to think about them. You don't need to necessarily think logically for things. This could be considered receiving specific, what you might call downloads, or it could just be you hear something from someone else, you read something, and you just immediately know that it's true without needing to have all of this extra supportive detail. Some part of you just knows. A spiritual teaching that I've heard that I really resonate with is that as you grow spiritually, you will no longer need, as you grow spiritually, you will engage what is called your knowing. You will no longer need to think. You will just know. The small self thinks, but the true self knows. As you become more aligned with your true self, you will just know things. The next one is what is called clairsentience. This would be considered extrasensory feeling. You will naturally start to sense the energetic presences or just the general tone of the energy around you. Again, picking up on good vibes, bad vibes, or the tone and the texture of the energy in a certain place or even within your own body. And perhaps starting to actually feel things with your hands, or just your body might start picking up on things in the energy field around you. So that is a very common natural perception that begins to come online. Another one is called clairaudience. This is extrasensory hearing. Perhaps you can hear higher guidance. Sometimes it comes almost audibly. Some people have shared that they do hear exact words with what sound like audible sounds actually ringing someone's eardrum. Other times it can just be so clear that it almost mimics sound, that someone is actually almost hearing something directly. And other times it doesn't even need to be words. They can be extra frequency bands. A very common thing that happens as people expand spiritually is they begin to hear ringing in the ears. That's basically your system picking up on subtle shifts in frequency around you. So that is a very common experience and sensory perception that begins to open up. Another one is called clairvoyance. This would be extrasensory vision or seeing. So perhaps you can open up to seeing, you can see energy, you can see people's auras, or perhaps even see spirits or energy signatures around you. You can maybe see your friend's energy field around them. You can see energy, especially out in nature where things are very clear and attuned. It's possible to begin to start seeing things beyond the normal human visible light spectrum. This should not come as a surprise, especially when we consider that, from my understanding, the human eye is only capable of perceiving, I believe it is less than 0.1% of the visible light spectrum. Naturally, as we start to expand, we're going to start increasing more of what we see beyond that 0.1%. And now, as we move beyond the third eye, the crown begins to offer up even more perceptions. The crown is what connects you to the higher realms, what we might call spiritual realms, spiritual connections. As the energy starts to rise, as your crown opens, following the trajectory of the energy up through your primary energy centers, as each one begins to open, the crown follows suit. This is what will lead to what we would call spiritual connections. Here, as one opens their crown, it is common to now have experiences where one is connecting to beings that you might call spirit guides or ancestors, even angels or angelic presences. It is also possible to begin expanding and receiving connections with what we might call star family or star beings or galactic beings, or even just beings in higher dimensions, beings that operate in higher frequency bands of consciousness. Basically, as you raise in frequency, you start meeting other consciousness, other forms of consciousness that are also operating at these higher bandwidths, or who are at least able to now meet you at where you are because you've risen in frequency. Here's where things get really, really good. You begin to have direct connection with your own soul or your higher self, which is invaluable. Now, as your crown opens, you have a clear channel to your own highest self, which can now bring through direct communication and guidance from you, the highest version of you, which is crucially valuable. And also, perhaps on a similar magnitude or perhaps even greater, this is what allows for direct connection to the one infinite consciousness that you might call Source. Also, now, as your third eye and crown are opening up, it is also common to now experience an even deeper layer within your dreams, such as receiving direct teachings in your dreams. Your dream field begins to expand. It is possible to have what might be considered astral experiences. The astral realm is in another dimension that is very commonly associated with dreams. The dream realm is the astral realm. So you now begin to sense what actually happens in this other realm, which is another dimension. For example, you can begin to preview other timelines, your future timelines, possibilities that can begin to reveal themselves to you in your dreams. You may even begin to have connections with other beings, even people who you know in real life. Your astral selves can make contact, or with some of these higher guiding forces can make contact with you in your dreams. And also, here's where it is common to begin to receive what you might call intuitive downloads, where something might just be a complete full thought that just drops into your mind and you realize, where did that come from almost? Like, I wasn't thinking anything of the sort just now, and then all of a sudden this new well-coherent thought came in. That would be considered a download. So this could come in as, again, a full thought or just an idea or even some symbols, numbers, patterns, anything of the sort. So I would like to iterate to you that you are always connected to these things. You are always connected to your soul, to your higher self, to the infinite, to Source. But what has happened up until this point is that your radio broadcast system was not functioning properly up until now. All that's happening is that the connection is now being strengthened and reestablished at a deeper octave. So if this is happening to you, you're not opening anything that wasn't already yours. You're simply clearing the interference for them to blossom naturally. And these aren't abilities to acquire. As I mentioned, everyone has access to all of these. These are just simply your soul's languages. What is unique is your own way of expressing these abilities, your own unique combinations. Not everyone's going to have access to literally all of these. There are quite a few ways of expressing these types of sensory perceptions. Your soul, your human vessel, is very likely going to have a preference or going to be designed or have experience in various sensory perceptions that are going to be unique to you. And your unique combination is going to be exactly that, unique to you. And it will continue to evolve the more you clear and the more you expand. It will, again, be a self-perpetuating cycle as you continue to clear and make space for more. The more higher guidance comes in to teach you and guide you to continue to expand, it will continue to evolve. Now I want to talk about how to navigate all of this safely, because for a lot of us, this is very foreign. It is new. It is almost a mystery in many ways. So how does one navigate all of this expansion when you might be wondering, like, who or what is even out there that I could possibly be starting to open up to? Is everything that I could be connecting with benevolent? These are good questions to ask. And here is where I would like to empower you. You have free will. Nothing in existence can override your sovereignty. Nothing can take your power away. Only you can give your power away. You are always in control. If there is something that you do not wish to experience, it is your sovereign right to say no. And I highly recommend to get in the practice or just in the mindset of setting intentions in this entire area. Put out intentions of what you wish to experience as you start to open up to these things. And it doesn't even have to be specific, especially if you're new. You don't even know what could be possibly available for you to experience. All you need to do is intend on the feeling of what you're wanting to experience. For example, I only wish to experience connections that are in line with love, harmony, and beauty. I only welcome perceptions and connections that are in alignment with my highest good. Something of the sort. You don't need to necessarily speak it aloud, but if that makes it feel more robust for you, then that could be a good idea. But constantly keeping in mind that you're in control of this experience and you're allowed to dictate how this plays out for you. And the reality is also this: as you open up, some experiences may come in that may feel confusing or startling or perhaps even dark. This is totally normal. But as I mentioned, it's also not required. So if you wish to skip having these experiences, I'm going to share with you the most important skill to develop and focus on as you begin to open up in this manner. The most important skill you can have as you navigate through this new territory is discernment. Being able to discern whether something feels as if it is in alignment for you. Not for someone else, but for you. Someone else may be willing to have one version of an experience that might not be okay for you. So it's all about what feels aligned for you. And how can you train your discernment? Because a lot of this stuff is going to be new. You might not have a strong foundation, a lot of pattern, or a lot of data to make sense of, is this okay? I don't know, or perhaps you might be the only one around you who's opening up in this manner. So you don't really have anyone to ask, hey, was this experience normal? Discernment comes through your body. Your body is an intelligent vehicle, and it will give you signals of whether or not something feels aligned or not. And you also, as I've been alluding to earlier, have an inner North Star. Your intuition is beginning to strengthen. Combining those two together, your body-based signals combined with your inner knowing and your intuition, is all you need. Those things in tandem will be a very strong signal of whether or not what you're experiencing is right on track, is in alignment for you. So essentially, what you're looking for is to notice through resonance. How does this make me feel? You don't want to, if something's making you fearful or uneasy, you're feeling uneasiness, that's a sign this isn't for me. And sometimes even neutral can be questioning, that's okay, it could go either way. This is where your discernment will come into play. I myself have had many, many experiences in these areas. Many were completely terrifying and pushed me to the absolute brink. But also I've had plenty of exquisitely beautiful experiences as well. If you've been having shaky experiences in these areas, it is totally okay and completely normal for this to happen at first. It does help train your discernment and your intuition. So if you are having any experiences of the sort, they will fade. They will stabilize. Especially as you begin to stabilize, your extrasensory perceptions will start to stabilize, and you will learn to adapt. And you will realize your intentions will evolve as well. What will you allow into your life and into your experience? And also, you may even look back and be thankful for some of the startling, more wobbly type of experiences if you end up having them, because you may realize that they forged you into someone who's able to power through and overcome challenging circumstances. For myself, I have the same mindset on my own prior experiences that were quite startling or wobbly. I now look at them with a new lens, that they forged me into who I am today, into someone who's very strong. And I have acceptance around them now. But I will also share that growth through ease is also welcome. So it is totally up to you. Now, why are these gifts appearing at all? What is all of this leading to? Just spent quite a bit of time on the types of things that you can open up to, but What's the real driving force behind all of this? Essentially, why do you have all of these abilities anyways? Is it really just to show them off to other people? Well, as you clear and reconnect, something else starts to happen. You begin wanting a life that actually matches who you are. You begin seeking your true purpose of what you are meant to be doing with your own uniqueness and how you will put these abilities to good use. This becomes an unquenchable desire to figure out, what do I do with all of this? I am opening up. I have these extrasensory perceptions. I have perhaps what you might call gifts. How am I going to put them to use? Becomes a driving force in your life. Here, as you inevitably begin to expand and start stabilizing, these are the types of things that now begin to happen. This is what your gifts are now leading to. Essentially, alignment becomes non-negotiable. You become increasingly aware of what everything does to your energy. Does this add to my energy, or does this take my energy? This goes for people, circumstances, jobs, physical environments, so on and so forth. This becomes painfully aware of how everything impacts your own energy. And naturally, you only wish to engage in things that are in alignment to you. Things like old jobs, old relationships, old identities begin falling away. And on the flip side, things like joy become your compass. It is no longer about meeting these external barometers of success, but now it's rather about, how do I feel? How do I feel inside? Again, alignment becomes your compass. Things like peace and harmony also become some of the highest values in your life. You become way less tolerant of things like chaos, drama, or not having stability. So also, as you follow your inner compass, as you start following that intuition, flow becomes normal. You start entering into a flow state because you realize you are locked in to this pathway that you are co-creating with your soul and your own intuitive senses. And naturally, as your heart opens, as we discussed earlier, you start feeling more connected, softer, more easeful, loving, compassionate. As your crown opens, you start feeling connected to all things, to the divine and things in nature, perhaps. What happens next is that a desire to be of service becomes natural. The desire to contribute awakens. That is what a lot of this is leading towards. Not just to have fun, cool abilities, but how can you be of service with them to the whole, to the collective? And your life begins reorganizing around meaning and your true purpose. If you have been longing for purpose to activate a deeper meaning, this spiritual awakening process is the exact pathway for it. Purpose isn't something you chase. It's what rises when everything false falls away. Now, after some time of clearing, expanding, opening up, there is a primary, you could call, goal of all of this. The primary objective, a state of being that you want to reach as you start moving through this process, is embodiment. Someone who is always clearing, stabilizing, being exposed to explosive new experiences and blowing through their identities can't really move forward in a grounded manner. Eventually, you need to bring this back down to earth, become grounded. All of what you are opening up to eventually wants to become second nature, where you don't even need to think about any of this stuff. And eventually, it wants to just become lived in, lived through you, become alive in your day-to-day life, in your day-to-day activities. And the good news is that this is a natural process. This will happen as you stabilize through your expansion cycles. But as you are moving through this, it can be helpful to ask yourself, as you start opening up to these experiences, how can I embody this in my day-to-day life? As opposed to just perhaps maybe seeking constantly new experiences or trying to continue to push forward Too intensely, how can you bring it back down into your day-to-day life is a very important question to ask. Now, what tends to happen as you embody more of what you expanded into? I will share the inevitable reality of what tends to come after this, because your external circumstances don't necessarily get easier. Challenge is still a part of this life in this world. But what happens is the way you respond gets easier. There may still be times where you may be asked to take a leap of faith, but that becomes easier because you now have your intuition and your knowing guiding you. Courage becomes far more natural rather than you forcing it. It just becomes an inevitable part of your path to stay in alignment. You essentially reach points and thresholds where you realize you can't not take leaps of faith, because that is what is required to experience the alignment for your path, for a meaningful, purposeful life. What also tends to happen is staying small becomes impossible, because you know now that you are here for a purpose. And your mission, if you feel you have one, your purpose becomes increasingly loud. It starts pointing you, tugging on you, telling you you have things to do in this life. You are meant to do something. You are meant to be of service. Eventually it gets to the point where you can no longer ignore those things. Also, what tends to happen is your soul begins steering your life with you. It doesn't take you over. But this is what it begins to start feeling like you are in full alignment with your highest aspects. Your soul is working with you, and it ends up feeling again like you are in this state of divine flow. And as you are in more of this divine flow, this brings about more synchronicities, where it feels like you're in the right place at the right time. You're meeting the right person. You're having the invitations that weren't normally coming into your field in the past. This is what happens when you're in flow. Natural, benevolent, positive things just start naturally showing up into your reality. And again, alignment brings about more alignment. It's this self-perpetuating cycle. As you seek and desire to live more in harmony and in alignment, naturally that continues to perpetuate itself. Misalignment may still arise. As I mentioned, there can still be struggle and challenge. But what happens is, now that you are opened up, you have your intuition, your knowing, you realize quickly where misalignment is showing up, and you can resolve them at a much faster pace than perhaps you would in the past. Also, because you are at a place where you no longer can tolerate it for longer periods of time. So this embodiment phrase is the moment your soul stops whispering and starts leading. Now, putting all of this together, why does all of this happen this way? It is all pointing to one thing, so you can remember why you came here. Your gifts aren't random. Your sensitivity is not an accident. Your desire for meaning is your soul remembering itself. You're not awakening to escape life. You're awakening to finally live it. So, if you are remembering your gifts or why you came here, I walk with you. If you would like to step into your soul's mission more fully, feel aligned with your deepest life purpose, and expand into your soul's unique abilities. If you would like support in navigating a leap into the unknown, making sense of what's coming online for you, to strengthen your foundations as you continue your expansion process, I would be honored to support you. I have navigated each and every one of these things to the fullest, and I welcome you to reach out to check out my website and any of my offerings that may be resonant for you. I would be honored to support you in anything that you may be moving throughout this entire spiritual awakening process. That wraps up this video and this series on spiritual awakening. I would love it if you could leave a comment on anything that stood out to you, whether in this video or in this entire series. Let me know if you have any questions, if there's something that was unclear that you would like to be cleared up, or if there's something that you would like me to dive a little bit deeper on, or you can perhaps just share how your experiences have been going. If you find yourself on this spiritual awakening process, if there are things that you're opening up to that are crazy, if you are having really wonderful, beautiful experiences, I would love to hear them. So I hope this video and this series have served you in some way, and I hope this was meaningful and helpful and supportive for you. And I really appreciate you taking the time to watch this. So thank you so much, and I will see you next time.